එය
Recording
කොළඹ
in progress.
විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයෙන් විශ්‍රාමගෙන වසර 12කට පස්සේ. පසුගිය දිනවල මාධ්‍ය සමහරක මා පිළිබඳව කියවුණු වැරදි කතාවක් වැරදි කිරීමටත් මම මෙය අවස්ථාව කරගන්නට කැමැතියි. ඒ වැරදි කතාව තමයි මා විශ්‍රාම වැටුපක් ලබා ගනිමින් සිටින අයෙකුය කියලා. මා විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ජීවිතයෙන් සමුගත් කාලේ විශ්‍රාම වැටුප් ක්‍රමයක් විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ආචාර්ය මහාචාර්ය වරුන්ට නොතිබුණු අතර අපට හිමි වූයේ හුදෙක් විශ්වවිද්‍යාල අර්ථ සාධක අරමුදලෙන් විශ්‍රාම යාමේදී එක්වර ලැබෙන දීමනාව පමණක් බවයි. මේ තොරතුර ඔබගේ පුවත්පත් ප්‍රවෘත්ති ගණනාවක සඳහන් වෙච්ච නිසා එක්කම සමාජ මාධ්‍යවල එය පසක තබා 2009 වසරේ පැවැත්වුණු ජනාධිපතිවරණ සමයෙහි ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මහතා වෙනුවෙන් සකස් කරනු සෞභාග්‍යයේ දැක්ම තුල අන්තර්ගත ආර්ථික ප්‍රතිපත්ති පෙළ සකස් කිරීම සඳහා තිරයෙන් පිටුපස සිට යම් මැදිහත් වීමක් කිරීමට මට අවස්ථාව ලැබුණා. එහෙත් මෙය මතවාදී වශයෙන් එකී ප්‍රතිපත්තිවලට බෙහෙවින් අනුගත වීම නිසා සිදුවක් මිස එවෙනුවෙන් කිසිම ප්‍රතිලාභයක් අපේක්ෂාවෙන් කළ දෙයක් නොවේ. මා අධිපති ධුරයේ වැඩබාරගත් දිනට සතියකට දෙකකට පමණ පෙර ජනාධිපති ලේකම් ආචාර්ය පී.වී. ජයසූරිය මහතාගෙන් මහා බැංකුව අධිපති ධුරය බාර ගන්නයි මා වෙත ලැබුණු ඉල්ලීම මට මහත් විස්මයක් ගෙන දුන් අතර එය කිසිසේත් අපේක්ෂා නොකළ ඉල්ලීමක් වුණා. මීට පෙරත් මා කොළඹ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ උපකුලපති ලෙස සිටි වකවානුවේහි 2004 වසරේදී මහා බැංකුව අධිපති පදවිය බාර ගැනීමට මගෙන් කරන ලද ඉල්ලීමද මා පෞද්ගලික හේතු මත ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කළ මතකයි. මෙවර කරන ලද ඉල්ලීමද මා එකහෙලා නොපිළිගත් විට යටත් පිරිසෙයින් වසරකටවත් එම පදවිය දරමින් ප්‍රතිපත්ති සාධනයේදී මාද උදව් කළ අලුත් ආණ්ඩුවට අවශ්‍ය මතවාදී සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන ලෙස කරනු ඉල්ලීමට මා අවසානයේහි එකඟ වුණා. මේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් හැටියටයි මහ බැංකු ධුරය අධිපති ධුරය බාරගෙන දැනට දෙවසරකට කිට්ටු කාලයක් ගතව ගියේ. මෙම කාලය තුල මා නිවැරදියයි විශ්වාස කළ ආර්ථික හා මූල්‍ය ප්‍රතිපත්ති රාමුව තුල ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහ බැංකුවේ කාර්යභාරය මෙහෙයවීමට කටයුතු කරලා තිබෙනවා. මා හැම විටම විශ්වාස කළ පරිදි මෙම තනතුරෙහිදී කිසිම තීරණයක් මගේ හෘදය සාක්ෂියට විරුද්ධව ගෙන නැහැ. අවංක භාවය, ඒකාග්‍රතාව හා මූල්‍ය විනය මා මෙහෙය වූ මූලික ගුණාංග. මා නිවැරදියයි විශ්වාස කළ තවමත් විශ්වාස කරන වසර 45ක විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ජීවිතයේදී දිගටම මගේ ඉගැන්වීම් මෙහෙය වූ දේශපාලන ආර්ථික මතවාදය ආර්ථික විද්‍යාඥයන් අතර දැනට සිටින සුළුතර පිරිසකුයි විශ්වාස කරයි. මහ බැංකුවේ සිටින අති විශාල උගත් පිරිස පිළිබඳවත් තත්ත්වය එහෙමයි. එනිසා එම මතවාදය අනුව ක්‍රියා කිරීම මහ බැංකුව තුළ පහසු කටයුත්තක් නම් නොවුණු බව සඳහන් කරන්නේ කිසිවෙකුත් සමග අමනාපෙන් නම් නොවේ. කෙසේ හෝ වසරකටවත් මෙම තනතුර භාර ගන්නාසේ කළ ඉල්ලීම උඩ එය භාරගත් මා වසර 2කට ආසන්න කාලයක් එම තනතුරේ වැඩ කටයුතු කිරීමෙන් සිට තීරණය කරගෙන හිටියේ ලබන මාසයේ මගේ 80 වැනි උපන්දින විශ්‍රාම යාමටයි. එහෙත් පසුගිය සතියක් හෝ දින 10ක් හෝ තුල සිත් රිදවන සිදුවීම් මගේ එම විශ්‍රාම යාම සති 6කින් පමණ ඉක්මන් කළා. මම ලබන 14 වනි ලබන සතියේ 14 වනි අඟහරුවාදා මෙම තනතුරින් විශ්‍රාම යාමට අපේක්ෂා කරන බව ඔබට හා ඔබ හරහා මහජනයාට දැන්වීමටයි මා ඔබ අමතන්නේ. මෙලෙස මා විශ්‍රාම ගන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ඇති ඉතාම වැදගත් ගෞරවනීය තනතුරකින්. එම තනතුරෙහිලා මට පැවරී තිබුණු වගකීම් නොපිරිහෙලා ඉටු කිරීමට රෑ දවල් නොබලා වෙහෙස වී කටයුතු කරලා තිබෙනවා. එහෙත් අපගේ පාලනයෙන් බැහැරව පවත්නා බොහෝ ස්වාභාවික හා මානුෂික බලවේග හේතු කොටගෙන අප අපේක්ෂා කළ ප්‍රතිඵල හැම විටම ඒ ආකාරයෙන්ම ලැබුණේ නැහැ. මෙහිලා සඳහන් කළ යුතු ප්‍රධානම කරුණ ඔබ දන්නා පරිදි මා වැඩ බාරගෙන මාස 3 නම් 2020 මාර්තු මාස සිට බලපවත්වමින් පැවති COVID-19 වසංගත රැලි. මෙහිලා බලපෑ තවත් බොහෝ මානුෂික හා ආයතනික කාරණා තිබුණා. මේ දුෂ්කරතා මැද්දේ වඩා යහපත් ප්‍රතිඵල සඳහා කළ යුතු ප්‍රතිපත්ති වෙනස්කම් ගැනත් සිතමින් මානසික පීඩනයෙන් පසු කළ දින ගණන් බොහෝයි. එනිසා ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම මෙලෙස මහ බැංකු අධිපති තනතුර අත්හැරලීමට සිදුවීම ගැන මා හා මගේ හිතවතුන් හිතන්නේ සංගවී පැමිණි ආශිර්වාදයක් ලෙසයි. ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය ආරමුදල තුළ අතිශයින් ආකර්ශනීය වන බැටුක් හා වෙනත් පහසුකම් සහිත විකල්ප විධායක අධ්‍යක්ෂ තනතුර ඉදිරි වසර සඳහා බාර ගැනීමට මහ බැංකු අධිපති තනතුරෙන් ඉවත් වන මගෙන් ඉල්ලීමක් කර ඇති බව මා සඳහන් කළ යුතුයි. පසුගිය දිනවල මා ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය ආරමුදලට යන බවක් පුවත්පත් ආදියෙහි සඳහන් වූයේ මෙවැනි අදහසක් ගැන පුවත්පත්වලට ඉඟියක් ලැබුණු නිසා විය යුතුයි. එසේම මීට පෙරත් විශ්‍රාමගත් අධිපතිවරයෙකු එලෙස ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය ආරමුදලේ එකී තනතුර සඳහා ගොස් ඇති බවත් මා සමග පවසා ඇත. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ගත් කල මේ අතිශයින් ආකර්ශනීය වූ තිලිනයක් වත් මා අගයන ප්‍රතිපත්ති හා මතවාදයන් අනුව එම තිලිනය පිළිගැනීමට මම ඉතාම මැලි වෙමි. එනිසා මම ඒ තිලිනය ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කෙලෙමි. විශ්‍රාම යාමෙන් පසු මට මගේ ශාස්ත්‍රීය කටයුතු සඳහා ප්‍රයෝජනවත් විවේක කාලයක් ලැබෙතැයි මා අපේක්ෂා කරමි. මහ බැංකු අධිපති පදවිය දරමින් කීප අවස්ථාවක මා ප්‍රකාශ කළ කරුණක් මෙහිලා සඳහන් කිරීමට කැමැතියි. එනම් අප මගේ වයසේ අය ඉගෙනගත්තු කාලෙත් එවැගේම අදත් අපි අපගේ රට පූර්ණ සංවර්ධිත එහෙම නැත්නම් දියුණු වෙමින් පවතින රටක් හැටියට හඳුන්වමින් කටයුතු කර කර ඒ ජාත්‍යන්තර වශයෙන් පිළිගත් සම්ප්‍රදාය බව මම දන්නවා. එහෙත් තවමත් මෙසේ දියුණු වෙමින් පවතින රටක් ලෙස ලංකාව හඳුන්වා ගැනීමට සිදුවීම ගැන සැබවින්ම අප කනගාටු විය යුතුයි. මෙම තත්ත්වයෙන් මිදීමට ගන්නා ප්‍රයත්නයේ හවුල්කරුවෙකු වීමටයි මට අවශ්‍ය වුණේ. ඒත් ඒ සඳහා අප සමාජයේ හෝ අප පක්ෂ දේශපාලනයේ කැපවීමක් නැති බව, එසේ මේ සඳහා පැහැදිලි ප්‍රතිපත්ති රාමුවක් එකහෙලා දීර්ඝකාලීනව අනුගමනය නොකිරීමේ ප්‍රශ්නය දවස්වරකට ආසන්න පසුගිය කාලය තුළ වඩාත් මැනවින් ප්‍රත්‍යක්ෂ කර ගැනීමට මට හැකි වුණා. මේ නිසායි අපට පසුපසින් සිටි බොහෝ රටවල් එකක් පසුපස එකක් වශයෙන් සංවර්ධන ගමනේදී අප පසු කරගෙන යන්නේ. මෙම අවස්ථාවේ මා කෙටියෙන් සඳහන් කළ කරුණු ගැන කිව යුතු තවත් බොහෝ දේ ඇතත් මම එපමණකින් නවතිනවා. මහ බැංකු අධිපති ධුරයෙහි කෙටි කලක් හෝ සේවය කිරීමට හා එයින් අත්දැකීම් ලැබීමටත් රටට හා ජනයාට සේවය කිරීමටත් මට අවස්ථාවල් සලසා දුන් අතිගරු ජනාධිපති ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මහතාටත් ජනාධිපති ලේකම් ආචාර්ය පී.බී. ජයසුන්දර මහතාටත් මම කෘතඥතාව පළ කරනවා. මා මහ බැංකුව අධිපති ධුරය දරූ කාලය තුළ ඉතාමත්ම හිතවත් භාවයකින් මා සමග ක්‍රියා කළ මුදල් මණ්ඩල සමාජිකයන් හා සියලුම මහ බැංකු නිලධාරිනියන් මා මෙහිලා සිහිපත් කරන්නේ කෘතඥතාවෙන්. මුදල් මණ්ඩලයේ සමාජිකයන් හැටියට මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයේ ලේකම් සජිත් ආටිගල මහතා, පත්කල සමාජිකයන් වන සංජීව ජයවර්ධන, සමන්ත කුමාර සිංහ මහත්වරු සහ ආචාර්ය රාණි ජයමහා මහත්මිය මහ බැංකුවේ ඉහළ එසේම මහ බැංකුවේ ඉහළ කළමනාකාරීත්වයේ සියලුම නියෝජ්‍ය අධිපතිවරුන් හා සහකාර අධිපතිවරුන්, අධ්‍යක්ෂකවරුන් හා අධිකාරීවරුන් මා ස්තුතිවන්තව මතක් කරනවා. සියලු දෙනා නමින් සඳහන් කිරීමට මෙහිලා කාලයක් නැතත් මා ඊටාම කිට්ටුවෙන් ක්‍රියා කළ කිහිප දෙනෙකුගේ නම් මෙහි සඳහන් කළ යුතුමයි. අධිපති ලේකම් එරන්දි ලියනගේ, සන්ධාන නිලධාරී නුවන් ගමගේ, ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ සහකාර ලේකම් අශදී එදිරිසිංහ සහ සහකාර ලේකම් අස්සේල ඒකනායක යනු මේ කීප දෙනයි. ඔවුන්ගේ උදව් නොවන්නට මා කළ දෑ කිරීමට මා කෙසේ සමත් වනු ඇද්දැයි සිතා ගැනීමට අමාරුයි. ඊට අමතරව අධිපති කාර්යාලයේ සේවය කළ සියලු දෙනාත් රියදුරු හා ආරක්ෂක තනතුරු වල සේවය කළ අයත් මා ස්තුතිපූර්වකව සිහිපත් කරනවා. එවැගේම මෙම දුෂ්කර කාලයෙහි මා සමග සිටමින් මා රැක බලාගත් විරිඳ කල්‍යාණිත්, දියණිය ඉරේෂාත් මෙහිලා සිහිපත් කර කිරීම කළ යුතුමයි. මෙරට සිටින මගේ මිනිපිරියන් තිදෙනා මා පීඩාවට පත් වූ අවස්ථාවන්හි මගේ සිතට මහත් අස්වැසිල්ලක් වුණා. එසේම කටින් බැහැරව සිටින හර්ෂා රජිත් පුතුන් දෙදෙනා, ඔවුන්ගේ බිරිඳවරුන් සහ දරුවන් නිතර මා අමතමින් මට ලබා දුන් මානසික සහයෝගය මම මතක් කරන්නේ අතිශය දයාවෙන්. මහ බැංකුව ආර්ථික න්‍යාය හා පරිචයත්, මූල්‍ය න්‍යාය හා පරිචයත් පිළිබඳව විශ්වවිද්‍යාලය තුළ නොලත් දැනුම් හා අත්දැකීම් සම්භාරයක් මට ලබා දුන්නා. ඒ ගැන පසු කාලයෙහි යම් රචනාවක් කිරීමට හැකි වෙතොත් එය ප්‍රයෝජනවත් වන්නට පුළුවන්. එසේම මහ බැංකු සමාජය මිනිස් ස්වභාවත්, මිනිස් හැසිරීමත් පිළිබඳව මට උගන්වා ඇති පාඩම් මේ සියල්ලට වඩා හෝ ඒ තරමටම වැදගත් හිතනවා. තීරණ ගන්නා විවිධාංශවලට එක් අරමුණක් ඇතිව එකමුතුව ක්‍රියා කළ හැකි නම් මීට වඩා යහපත් ප්‍රතිඵල ගත හැකි බව සඳහන් කිරීම වටිනවා. මහ බැංකුවේ හැම දෙනාටමත් අලුතෙන් අධිපති කාර්යභාරය සිය භාරයට ගන්නා අයටත් මම සුව පැතුම් එක් කරමින් මෙම කෙටි විශ්‍රාම යාමේ කතාව මෙතනින් අවසන් කරනවා. Let me speak to you, translate the same thing into English for those who are more familiar with that language. I assumed duties as the 15th Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka on 24th December 2019. This was 12 years since my retirement from University of Colombo. Retirement from university in 2007 was contrary to speculations in social media and newspapers recently. It was not a not with a pension in the traditional sense of the term, but merely with the lump sum provident fund benefit. During the period of preparation for the 2019 presidential election, when Vistas of Prosperity was being prepared, I had the pleasant experience of participation in the behind-the-scene work to draw up the economic policy framework for that document. It was an involvement which was merely due to my ideological commitment to the policy program that was being developed, the alternative policy program. There was absolutely no expectation of post-election benefits in my participation in this activity. About 2 weeks before I assumed duties as governor, there was totally unexpectedly an inquiry from Dr. P.B. Jayasundara, the Secretary to His Excellency the President, whether I could take over the responsibilities of central bank governor. This was totally unexpected and came as a complete surprise. On an earlier occasion in 2004, when I was still the Vice Chancellor of University of Colombo, the same request came to me. And I remember gratefully declining it at the time for personal reasons. When the request made in 2019 also was not accepted by me readily, I was asked to at least take it over for a year and provide the ideological support at policymaking level for a government which I also helped to set up. Eventually, I agreed to take over this responsibility. This is how I have assumed duties as Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and spent nearly 2 years in that position. During this period, I have acted conscientiously to guide and administer and give leadership to the central bank, remaining within the economic and monetary policy framework, which I believe to be correct. As I have believed and acted all my life in the central bank also, I have not taken any decision against my conscience. The fundamental moral principles which guided me have been honesty, integrity, and financial discipline. There is a political economy ideology which I believe and continue to believe to be correct. This has conscientiously guided my teaching in 45 years of my university academic life. I realize that only a minority of economists nowadays among us subscribe to these political economic perspectives. Among the large numbers of educated professionals in the central bank also, conditions are not any different. I must mention here, obviously not with any intention of hurting the feelings of anybody, that getting things done according to my policy perspective was not indeed an easy task. Nevertheless, I have assumed duties in this position in response to a request made of me to accept responsibilities for at least 1 year. And I have now been in this position for nearly 2 years. My intention and plan was to tender my resignation papers on my 80th birthday coming next month. The unpleasant events over the last week or 10 days have shortened my intended service period by about 6 weeks. I am addressing you now to inform you and through you, the general public, that I am planning to retire after Tuesday, 14th September. I am stepping down this way from one of the most important and respected positions in this country. I have worked tirelessly day and night to conscientiously perform my duties and functions with the greatest degree of diligence. But because of certain natural and human factors beyond our control, all the intended results of these efforts could not be achieved all the time. The most common such factor that has affected our work and its results, of course, has been the several waves of COVID-19, starting from just 3 months of my assuming duties. There were, of course, various other human and institutional factors also responsible for difficulties to achieve best results. Thinking of these and contemplating corrective measures to be taken, is indeed, there were many days and nights I spent under stress. I do therefore think that my having to give up the governor position even under these not so perfect conditions is indeed a blessing in disguise. Among many others in my family and close friends, there is also my family doctor who said this. I have been offered the position of Sri Lanka's alternative executive director at the International Monetary Fund in Washington for 1 year when I leave this position. An offer which is extremely attractive in terms of remunerations and other conditions. So what some of you, my newspaper friends and other journalists, have published during the last week or so in news about the retiring central bank governor going to take up an IMF position was indeed correct. I have declined this attractive offer, as this is against principles I cherish. I eagerly look for the leisure which I will get after this retirement to be usefully spent on academic writing, which has been postponed many occasions. I feel like repeating here a statement I have made several times during the period of my short tenure as governor. At the time we studied, that must have been about 50, 60 years ago, we referred to our country as an undeveloped or a developing country. And we must be ashamed about ourselves for having to continue even today to call ourselves a developing country. What I wanted was to become an active partner in the effort being taken to move out of this developing status. But over nearly the last 2 years, I have realized that our society or our system of party politics does not have systemic commitment for this object. Therefore, there is particularly the issue of the society not being able to agree on a clear policy framework and to stick to it for a long enough period of time. This is why we lag behind. And many countries after us are one after the other overtaking us in the race to achieve development. I have many things to say about matters briefly noted above, but let me stop at this point and move on to the more pleasant task of acknowledgement of assistance received. Let me begin by paying gratitude to His Excellency the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Secretary Dr. P.B. Jayasundara for giving me this opportunity to serve as Central Bank Governor, even for a short period, and to gain experience myself and also to serve the country and its people. I mentioned with gratitude the Monetary Board members and the Central Bank officials who have worked with me during my tenure as governor. There's a sense of friendship, and goodwill. The assistance received from members of the Monetary Board, Secretary to the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Sajid Artigala, appointed members, Mr. Sanjeeva Jawardhan, Mr. Samant Marsinga, and Dr. Mrs. Rani Jama. All the top management personnel, deputy governors and assistant governors, heads of departments, is gratefully acknowledged. I do not have the time here to mention all by name, but I would be remiss if I fail to mention a few by name. These are the Governor Secretary, Mr. Randi Lianagi, Protocol Officer, Mr. Nuan Gamagi, Senior Assistant Secretary, Ms. Ashadi Idrisingha, and Assistant Secretary, Mr. Afsela Ekanaik, without whose assistance I would not have done what I did. In addition, everyone who served the governor's office, those who served as drivers, security officers, etc., are mentioned here with a generous thank you. To conclude these acknowledgements, I must mention my wife, Kalyani, daughter Iresha, who have looked after me during this difficult and trying period. The three granddaughters have indeed been stress releases. Let me also mention my two sons, Harsha and Rajit, and their families living overseas, for constantly calling me and providing moral support. The central bank has taught me a great deal more than what I learned from universities about economic theory and practice, monetary theory and practice. If I could write a monograph on this subject, it will, I am sure, be extremely useful. In addition, the Central Bank Society has taught great lessons about human nature and human behavior. Lessons equally, if not more, valuable than knowledge about economics and monetary subjects. I have also learned how great it would be if decision makers join together to achieve one common target and work together towards that target with commitment. Let me conclude my brief retirement speech by wishing good luck to all in the central bank and also to the new governor. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. I understand there will be also some questions. I'm here to answer.
Can you hear me, Governor?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the reason for your retirement, and what are the main challenges that you have experienced during your short tenure?
Have you been talking to somebody when I was talking?
No.
That is, these are the two questions more or less which I tried to answer. Do you need any more reasons to be adduced or any further elaborations made? We can make this available to you, the written stuff. What is the next question, please? If there is any.
Mr. Shaharanis, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Governor, during your tenure, I think we had the record low interest rate as well as kind of excess money printing. I mean, do you think that those decisions or those strategies also contributed to your advanced resignation by any chance?
I don't think so, but this was a period, a very extraordinary kind of period affected by COVID and resulting lockdowns and things like that, and then the disruption of production activities and income flows of the people. So naturally, and also with the government having reduced revenues, the central bank had to come in and provide the resources to look after the people and also to attend to various problems coming up out of COVID-19. That is the reason why this excessive money supply increase happened. But these things, if we are careful and carefully planned, these things can be easily reduced with the budget being attended to and carefully developed to produce not necessarily surpluses, but at least reduce the budget deficits or fiscal consolidation, as some of you call. I don't think these developments which you have mentioned had anything directly to do with my resignation, but I do not know whether there was any indirect effect on it.
Okay. Professor, one more thing. There was a urge from even within the government to go to seek IMF assistance to come out of the crisis we are facing. I mean, from the central bank point of view and from from the institution you are heading, what was you have been contemplating on that, seeking IMF assistance?
This is a question which have been asked from us so many times in the past. Basically, seeking IMF assistance or not seeking IMF assistance in the form of a program is basically the government's decision. The central bank could advise one way or the other. So in our case, in our thinking, not necessarily all the central bankers, but at least among some, and also among many policymakers, policymaking leaders in the government, there was a belief that we must try to get out of this debt trap by depending more and more on income sources, non-debt creating income sources from abroad. That is what has been tried. Occasionally, when there is a need, short-term need for funds, we would go for some borrowing abroad, but to try and reduce borrowing as much as possible. So on that basis, the government may have decided not to go for a IMF program. But it does not mean that we have completely stopped any relationship with IMF. The relationship with IMF, the engaging with IMF is going on.
Thank you, Professor.
And in fact, the next assessment or examination of Sri Lankan conditions by the IMF, the so-called stand bearing, going to be done towards the end of this year. There will be most probably, if COVID permits, there will be a team of IMF officials visiting Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes, may I ask, Professor, this is Amal Jayasinghe from France Press AFP. You did mention that things were made quite difficult for you in the last week and up to about 10 days. And are you now actually, and it seems that you're actually now succumbing to that kind of pressure, but you're holding a position of governor, which is supposed to be an independent institution. So aren't you in a way giving in to, is it political pressure or is it something else? So your resignation, your premature retirement, as you say, doesn't it amount to your succumbing to that pressure and actually undermining the authority of the position of governor?
I don't think so, but I don't want to go into details of this, how this has happened. But the unpleasant incidents last week or last 10 days, I referred to the various newspaper reports without asking me a word, without raising even a minor question from me. There were references to W.D. Lakshman about various kinds of things. And that is what I said, unpleasant things. Of course, there were certain political developments as well during that time, but I am not willing to go into details of this.
But Governor, but given your position, do you think that, I mean, are we to take it that your...
Let me take that question in principle.
Yes.
The central bank, independence of central bank. There are different perspectives about central banking in the world. There is this independent central bank concept. The Sri Lankan authorities also tried to move towards that during some years ago. But that attempt has been given up because the Sri Lankan authorities are still happy with the original extra formulation of the central bank for Sri Lanka. In any case, personally, I don't think that a central bank in a country like ours can completely sever its relationships with the government and build up a completely independent organization, empire. So that is my personal view, but what ought to be done on this subject is, again, decision of the government and the parliament. This requires development of a new bill, which there was an attempt to do during the last regime. It had gone long distance towards enactment, but I think it had been given up by subsequent governments.
if I may just to follow up on that, though, and you at great length explain some of the circumstances, but to summarize, could we say it's kind of a ideological difference or policy difference that actually led to your premature retirement?
There are ideological issues, obviously, in any political conflict or debate. So there would have been some ideological things, but the kind of ideological divide I'm talking about did not come into this particular case. It is more related to persons.
Personal issues. Thank you, Governor.
Mr. Siriman, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, Governor. All the best in your future endeavors. I'm just seeking clarification from something you said earlier. You said IMF standby discussions, if it stand by your Article 4. And also, in hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently now that after 2 years, when you think back? And is there something that you wanted to do that you would not be able to do? Because I remember at the last press conference, you said that you had a plan to bring back whatever the rupee notes that had gone out of the system. And if so, what was that plan that you wish to carry out, and what was it that you wanted to do?
I don't know what you refer to as the last time as something.
Last press conference, sir, you said that there's a lot of cash that has gone out of the system, and that there was a plan to bring it back.
Anyway, in what sense or what reference I have mentioned that, I do not know. But your other question is what lessons I learned from, say, thinking about my 2-year experience or less than 2-year experience. I think I'm just completing that period of experience, that maybe I have to sit down and examine the developments that took place during this period, and then only I can come up with some useful ideas in a discussion like this. But still, it is the experiences are rather new.
Sir, about the word you used for the IMF team that is coming, was it a standby arrangement or is it Article 4?
Article 4, Article 4. I used the wrong word. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. All the best.
Thank you.
Mr. Ryan here again.
Hi, Governor, this is from Hero News. So you did mention the fact that there is a conspiracy, or there is a difference between the policy opinions between the government, that hence is a reason for the country to be a developing nation over the years. And also regarding the decision that was taken a couple of days back regarding the 100% LOS line letter of credit having to be deposited, I think it would be a heavy burden on especially the ground level people and the SMEs in the country, bringing leading to a price rise as well, and also putting the level of economic standard and level of living at stake. So what is your opinion regarding the policy that came up, and what is your aspect on it?
The thing is, I suppose you are referring to the circular sent out yesterday or day before yesterday about the LC margin issue.
That is right. Yes, Governor.
Now, the issue we tried to address is to bring some control in respect of the increasing trade deficit that we could observe over the last few months. While promoting exports as much as possible to various working groups and things like that, or task forces and things like that, we thought there has to be some effort in restraining imports. Restraining imports has to be very carefully done because it can affect essential commodities as well as essential intermediate products which are going into exports themselves. So as a result, our officials in economic research and various other departments have done a very careful study. And these studies have gone on for nearly 2 or 3 months and a lot of discussion. It is after that process, very extensive discussions, debates in the monetary board. It is after all this that this decision was taken and the circular issue. We still believe that the items that are mentioned in this are really inessential or non-urgent. If there are, of course, articles found in that list which will be of a different nature, essential for consumption as well as for production, then of course those articles can be removed. So this has to be a changing kind of exercise, but the objective is to achieve the restraint on the trade deficit expansion.
Agreed, Governor, but also going a little further, a step ahead. But we know that certain certain items mentioned are imported items that small SME companies use for their benefit. And we know the community, the economy is not an independent economy. So there is a lot of dependency that we have to depend on imports as well in order to sustain the SME companies and also the ground level. So as much as imports, there is a requirement which we trust the imports needs to be restricted in a more intellectual manner in order to take care of the trade deficit. So in such case, shouldn't it have been a lesser LOC amount instead of 100% on top of what is the current standard itself, on your opinion?
No, it would have been extremely difficult having several ratios operating at the same time. And in any case, we have just introduced this. Let us wait and see how it affects. I don't think any single producer had started complaining about their production being affected by this. Let us wait, and this is an instrument which the central bank has used to restrain imports on many occasions in the past. So this is less harmful than complete or quota-wise reduction of imports, because the volumes that are coming in are unlikely to be directly stopped or directly reduced. Only thing is, if somebody wants these commodities really, there might be some increase in prices.
Thank you, Governor. And also for the benefit of the Sinhala community, could I kindly request you to state both answers in Sinhala as well?
මම කිව්වේ මේ ආනයන සීමා කර ගැනීමේ විශාල වමනාවක් තියෙනවා. පහුගිය කාලේ අතරම පහුගිය මාස 3 විතර අපේ අපනායන ආදායම් සෑහෙන දුරට වැඩි වුණා. මොකද ඊට වඩා වේගයෙන් වැඩි වෙනවා ආනයන. ඉතින් මේ ප්‍රශ්නය විසඳගෙන වෙළඳ ශේෂයෙහි සහාය හරහා ජංගම ගිණුම් ශේෂයෙහි යම්කිසි පාලනයක් ඇති කර ගැනීම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය කාරණයක් බවට පෙනෙනවා මහ බැංකුව. නිසා අපි මාස ගණනක් තිස්සේ සකස් කරලා වෙනස් කරලා ආයි ඇතුළත් කරලා ඔය වගේ විවිධ උත්සාහයන් හරහා තමයි ඒකම නොයෙකුත් විදිහේ ඩිබේට්ස් වලින් පස්සේ වාද විවාද වලින් පස්සේ තමයි මේ කාරණයට අපි මේ කාරණය පිළිබඳ තීරණයකට අපි එළඹුණේ. මගේ ඉල්ලීම මේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය කළේ ඉතාමත්ම හොඳ හිතින් මහජනයාට හිරිහැර කරන්න හෝ එහෙම නැත්නම් නිෂ්පාදනාංශවලට හිරිහැර කරන්න හෝ නෙවෙයි අත්‍යවශ්‍ය කාරණයක් ඉටු කර ගැනීම සඳහා රටේ සාර්ව ආර්ථිකයේ එනිසා මේක ටිකක් අඩු ගානේ සතියක් දෙකක් වැඩ කරන්න දීලාරියමු කොහොමද තත්ත්වය බලලා වෙනස්කම් කරන්න ඕන නම් වෙනස්කම් කිරීමේ අවස්ථාව තිබෙනවා ඊළඟ මාසෙ වෙනවා.
Right, thank you, Governor, and good luck on your future endeavors.
Okay, thanks. සිංහලෙන් මේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා කවුරු හරි අහනවද නැත්නම් මම අහන්න ප්‍රශ්නෙත් කියවන්න. අර්ශන සිල්වා කියන්නේ කවුද? ඔබට ත්‍රිදවීම් ඇති වූ හේතු මොනවාද? ප්‍රතිපත්තිමය ගැටලු සහ අභියෝග මොනවාද? ඒවා ඇති කලේ කවුරුන්ද? මේ පහසුවෙන් උත්තර දෙන්න පුළුවන් ප්‍රශ්න නෙවෙයි වාක්‍ය දෙකෙන් තුනේ. මේ ඒ අසන මාත්මයට තමන්ම මේ මහ බැංකුවේ ඉන්න කෙනෙක් හැටියට තමන් එතන ඉඳගෙන අර ගිය සුමාන දෙක තුනේ පත්‍රවල තිබිච්ච දේවල් දිහා බලනවා නම් ඉතින් ඉත්‍රි දෙනක තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා මට හිතෙනවා. නැත්නම් ඉතින් මම එකින් එක ඒ කතන්දර එකින් එක අරගෙන මේක විස්තර කරන්න එකේ තේරුමක් නැහැ. ප්‍රතිපත්තිමය ගැටලු සහ අභියෝග නම් ඔබ හැමදෙයක්ම දන්නවා. ගැටලු ඒත් මේ විනාඩි දෙක තුනකින් කතා කරලා ඉවර කරන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් නෙවෙයි මේ මම සාමාන්‍ය කාරණා කීපයක් මගේ කතාවේ සඳහන් කළා. කවුරුන් මේ ඇති කළාද කියලා නම් මම දන්නේ නැහැ.
ගරු අධිපතිතුමනි මම වෙනුර රණාන්දු හිරු ප්‍රවෘත්ති අංශයෙන් කතා කරේ. අධිපතිතුමනි ඔබ මුලිනුත් සඳහන් කළා මේ කාරණාව සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන්ුත් පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් වුණා. අපිට සිංහල භාෂාව අවශ්‍ය නිසායි මම ප්‍රශ්නේ නැවත යොමු කරන්නේ. ඔබ ලබන මාසයේ ඔබේ 80 වන ජන්මදිනයත් එක්ක විශ්‍රාම යාමට තමයි තීරණය කළා තිබුණේ. නමුත් අර මුලින් සඳහන් කරපු ආකාරයේ සිත් රිදවීම නිසා මේ විශ්‍රාම යාම කලින් සිදුවන බව දැනුම් දුන්නා. එතකොට මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් යම්කිසි දේශපාලන බලපෑමක්ද රජයේ පාර්ශවයේ කියන ආණ්ඩුවේ පාර්ශවයෙන් තිබුණ දේශපාලන බලපෑමක්ද හේතු වුණේ මේ සිත් රිදවීම ඇති වෙන්නට?
මම කැමති නෑ ඒකට කෙලින්ම ප්‍රශ්නෙට උත්තර දෙන්න යන්න. මේ අහන හැමෝමත් ඔය ප්‍රශ්නෙට උත්තර දන්නවා. ඒ නිසා මගේ කටින් යම් දේවල් දැනගන්න වෙන්න ඇති අහන්නේ. ඒක පෞගිය සතියේ දෙකේ සිදුවීම් දහමයන් බලාගෙන යනකොට බලා ගන්න පුළුවන් ඉතින් මොකද උනේ
බොහොම ස්තුතියි අධිපතිතුමනි.
This is Amal again. If you don't mind, I just want to get a little more specific about exchange rate policy. Did you favor a more aggressive depreciation, or were you comfortable with the way it was going? I'm just trying to understand was whether that was one of the issues that hastened your retirement.
You are raising a question about depreciation of the rupee.
Exactly. That's correct.
If you are asking me for my opinion,
Yes.
I'm personally not in favor of continuous depreciation of a currency. Based on our own past experience, and also based on the studies, my own studies of the historical experiences of other countries. Now take, for example, countries in just take, for example, Japan. After the Second World War, Japanese yen was in terms of, US dollar was in terms of Japanese yen very high. Sometimes it was around 350. But with exports growing, there was a gradual, with the growth of the Japanese economy, there was a gradual strengthening of the yen, particularly after this so-called, I forget the word, so-called Plaza Accord. Similar things have happened in fast developing countries in the same part of the world. With the development, there has been gradual appreciation of the rupee, appreciation of the domestic currency. Now, take what has happened to Sri Lanka. You take conditions from, if you have the patience to study from the 1970s or 60s onwards, this rapid depreciation of the currency started really in 1977 with the 1977 liberalization. I am not trying to criticize liberalization process, but this depreciation process started at that time. Every year from 1978 onwards, there was a depreciation of the rupee. There was a very interesting statement which Mr. J.R. Jayawardena made in a press conference held in India, I think in the early 1980s or mid 1980s, earlier. He says like this, referring to the IMF advisors. As he's saying, they are telling me to devalue. I have devalued the rupee from, he gives the number which was there, which was the 1978 exchange rate. And then he referred to the mid-80s exchange rate. He says, I have devalued from this to this. Now, they are further advising further depreciation. But there is a time, he says, I should be telling them, that's enough, that's it, no more. So it's a very interesting conversation Mr. Jayawardena had with Indian, I think, journalists. Anyway, leaving that aside, in 1978, I think our US dollar was something like, I don't have the numbers, but something like 89 rupees. Now consider what it is today, or what it was in the early 2000s, what it was in, say, 1990s. Gradually, every year, absolutely no change in terms of course, short period of ups and downs. But when you take the trend, year after year, there was depreciation. What did we achieve from depreciation? The economic theory tells us depreciation helps this, helps that, but nothing of that sort has happened. Our trade deficit continued to weaken. So I can go on talking about it, but my perception is that if we can, we must try and maintain a stable exchange rate, if we can. So to get that ability to do so, we have to go on increasing our foreign exchange earnings, non-debt foreign exchange earnings, and also in the process, improve our reserve position. So this ideal policy framework, we had difficulties in developing during the past few months because of the problems, exports were developing, but imports were going faster. There were various speculative pressures on the rupee. So this is a complex matter for which still the right answers are a little far away.
Thank you very much, Professor. Do you think that you could have used interest rates a little more effectively to control imports rather than actually getting into some of these monetary and fiscal restrictions?
I'm sure you guys have learned these subjects somewhere. And why are you asking all these questions here? Economic theory questions, effects on interest rates and effects on exchange rates, things like that. I would have very happily gone on explaining these things if it was in one of my students or group of my students. But you are all aware of it.
We are also students, Governor.
Anyway, I think we have had enough. If you have.
Governor, I have a question now. The imports ban were imposed as early as, I think, December 2019. Do you think there was a success of that import, because we didn't see a significant reduction in the import if you see the data? I mean, is there any reasons for that, Governor?
The import restrictions you are referring to the restrictions on motor cars.
I mean, if we started from somewhere in December and there were more restrictions in March last year, and now it's continuing.
I think at some stage during the period you are referring to, there was also some lessening or release of some of the controls. The COVID affected year, there were somewhat strong import controls, but they were released because in 2020, by 2021, the production processes were getting improved and exports were going up. So there was the demand and the need to relax some of these import restrictions. There are, of course, different perspectives on this subject, import controls and how that can be done and what would be its effects. So there are some economists consider this a very bad thing, import controls. Others are not that pessimistic about import controls. One of the things we learn in textbooks is that the direct controls are rather more effective than indirect controls tried out through various changes in taxes and things, import duties and things like that. So this is a complicated issue. Shyam Nuwan Ganewat also wants to ask me something. Maybe
One more question. I'll stop with that, Governor. So you said you were anyway to retire next month, but if we see the last 10 days, what happened was one former governor who is a state minister now had been speculated to take over, and he has been telling that he was likely, and then he was to resign. Those are the stories published in the papers, but that's nothing to do with the media. It's basically coming from the government. Does that mean that government indirectly asked you to resign prematurely?
I don't answer that question. Refuse to answer that question. Okay.
No problem. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you. Ganewat is asking me, වෙනත් තනතුරක් බාර ගැනීමට සූදානමකින් ඉන්නවාද? ඒ සඳහා ඔබතුමාට ආරාධනයක් ලැබී තිබෙනවා. ඒකත් මම පිළිතුරු නොදෙන ප්‍රශ්නයක් වඩපත් කරනවා. එහෙම ආරාධනා නම් තියෙනවා. නමුත් මම කිව්වේ මම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා විවේක ගන්න. ඒකයි පිළිතුරක් හැටියට දෙන්නට තියෙන්නේ.
Governor,
Yeah.
Ranga here. Just want to ask you your opinion. How do you see this current forex trade controls, curbing forex trade, how that is going to impact the dollar rupee? And aren't you worry about that it is giving fuel to rising the informal sector? They are using all other ways of bringing in foreign currency instead of using the formal sector for remittances. So don't you think that it will further reduce remittances into the country on the formal sector?
There are problems like this. I think I don't have any relevant officials around me here. You should probably raise this issue when senior central bank officials from various departments are around. I have my own views, but now me moving out of the central bank sometime early next week, there is no point in my trying to answer some of these questions now. I think there will be a discussion participated by central bank officials later, very soon. You can raise these issues in such a meeting. There are too many questions.
Thank you, Governor. And are you hoping to have or will you explain the reasons in detail why you are resigning later, or any plans to make public the decision?
No, you can make public the decision which I have given in my presentation.
The reason for the decision?
Reason, I'll give it a careful thought. Maybe if I decide to open up myself, I'll do that later. There are some other questions. Are you still following an anti-IMF policies? Are you ready to accept CBSL pension benefits after working only less than 2 years? The first question, anti-IMF policies means, to me, IMF policies, to me means the various policies the IMF recommends in the program, which we have seen in many countries, which we have seen also in Sri Lanka. I have my reservations about that program, taken as a whole. I had reservations, I continue to have reservations. So this has to be discussed in the light, using actual numbers. And I am not prepared to do that now. Then these pension benefits, this has come up, I don't know, unnecessarily in the newspapers. There was a system like this in the central bank. I cannot remember when it was stopped, but for some reason it was stopped in a particular year. And after that, there were inquiries and requests and all that to reinitiate that program, pension program. Now, the Monetary Board has considered this and has taken a decision. So this decision, let that decision be implemented. If that decision is being implemented, then if I am found to be eligible, they might pay me. I don't mind accepting it because I am not already a pensioner, as I mentioned in my presentation. As some of the newspapers alluded to. And also, people must be thinking of huge amounts in the form of these pensions for a governor. I recommend you make some inquiries about the salaries, etc., structures in the central bank. Another question is, what is the advice you would give to your replacement? What is the key step he can take to improve the matter? If someone asks for my advice, I will definitely give. But my policy is that when I move out of a particular organization, I don't meddle with it from outside. That has been my policy with the university, with also a couple of other organizations where I have served. මෙරට ආර්ථික අර්බුදය කොපමණ කල් පවතීද? ඇයි IMF එකෙන් අපි සහාය ලබා ගන්න නැත්තේ? මම කිව්වා ඒක පැහැදිලිවම මේ ආණ්ඩුව ගත යුතු තීරණයක්. සමහර විට ආණ්ඩුව ඔය කියන විදිය තීරණයක් ගනී, සමහර විට ගන්න එක නෑ. මෙච්චර කොච්චර කලක් ඒ අර්බුදය පවතීද කියන එක කියන්න හරි අමාරු. නමුත් මොකද කියන්න හරි අමාරු. අපි දන්නවා අපිට ඉදිරි කාලෙහි ගෙවන්න තියෙන මුදල් ගැන. නමුත් අපි හරියටම දන්නේ නැහැ ඉදිරි ඉදිරි අවුරුද්ද මාස 15-20 තුල අපිට කොයිතරම් විතර මුදල් ප්‍රමාණයක් රටට ගලා එයිද. අප ණයන වලින් ඊළඟට මේ රෙමිටන්සස් ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ශ්‍රමිකයන්ගෙන් එන මුදල් වලින් ඊළඟට අපේ ලක් එකක් තිබිලා අපේ ටුවරිසම් සෙක්ටර් එක ඉක්මනට ඕපන් කරන්න පුළුවන් වුණොත් ඒකෙන් කොච්චර මුදල් එයිද? ඊට අමතරව ওই තරම් මුදල් ප්‍රමාණයක් ආයෝජන සඳහා, ඍජු ආයෝජන සඳහායි, පෝර්ට්ෆෝලියෝ ආයෝජන සඳහායි එයාදී නොයෙකුත් ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේ ප්‍රශ්න කාලේ ගත වීමත් සමග තමයි හරියාකාරව හිතා ගන්න පුළුවන් කොයි විදිහටද විසඳෙන්නේ. ඔය ප්‍රමාණ තීරණය වන්නේ. ඒ නිසා මම හිතනවා මේක කොච්චර කල් මේ අර්බුදය පවතීද කියන එක අමාරු උත්තර දෙන්න. තව දෙකක් තියෙනවා කියනවා. Is Sri Lanka heading towards an economic crisis to a point of no return? මට තේරෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? I don't know what you understand, Mr. Benedict, by point of no return. Countries do not undergo that kind of problem. Even a very weak country may have come to some crisis situation, and with careful policy making would have come up gradually. So there is, I can't think of any point of no return. There will be reversal of development under very carefully crafted policies. අවසාන වශයෙන් ඔබතුමා සඳහන් කළා 2004 වසරේ මහා බැංකුව අධිපති තනතුර සඳහා ආර්දනා විදාස වකවානුවට සාපේක්ෂ වෙන වාසි වැඩි තියෙන අවස්ථාවක 2019 දී ඔබ අධිපති. ඇයි කියලා අහනවා මම දැන් බාරගත්තේ එදා බාර ගන්න නැතුව. මම කිව්වනේ එදා බාර නොගත්තේ මගේ පෞද්ගලික තමත්ම මේ කොහෙත්තම බාර ගන්න බැරි විදිහේ පෞද්ගලික ප්‍රශ්නයක් තිබුණා. ඔය ආරාධනය ඒ ගැන විස්තර අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. හොඳයි බොහොම ස්තුතියි ක්‍රියාශීලී ලෙස සාකච්ඡාවට සහභාගී වීම ගැන. I hope you will use my presentation and provide a fair presentation to the people. Thank you.
මේ වගේ වීඩියෝ දිනපතා නරඹන්න අපේ channel එක subscribe කරන්න.